The $2.3 billion infrastructure contract was falling apart at 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, and nobody at Corner Café in downtown Washington, D.C. had any idea they were about to witness one of the most important diplomatic interventions in recent business history. Chinese executives Liu Wei and Zhang Min sat across from American project managers Jennifer Martinez and David Park, their voices rising in frustration as weeks of negotiations crumbled over cultural misunderstandings and translation errors that threatened to destroy a partnership that would create thousands of American jobs. Behind the espresso machine, barista Amanda Foster listened to the heated exchange in Mandarin, French, and broken English, her hands never stopping their methodical preparation of lattes and cappuccinos. What the failing negotiation table didn't know was that their neighborhood coffee shop employee had spent 14 years as a State Department translator, conducting high-level diplomatic negotiations in 7 different languages for some of America's most sensitive foreign policy operations. And in the next 30 minutes, those skills would save an international business deal worth more than most countries' annual GDP. Amanda Foster was 36 years old, had been working as a barista at Corner Café for 3 years and 8 months. Every morning at 5:30 a.m. she arrived in standard café attire, but her preparation routine revealed something unusual. While other baristas checked inventory and cleaned machines, Amanda conducted what she privately called her linguistic assessment. She identified the languages being spoken by early customers, noted cultural preferences and ordering patterns, mentally cataloged the diplomatic personnel who frequented the cafe during their lunch breaks between meetings at nearby embassies and international organizations. The coffee shop customers and neighborhood regulars knew Amanda as the barista who could somehow communicate with everyone. The Japanese tourists struggling with English, the French diplomats discussing policy, the German business executives coordinating deals. She never seemed flustered by language barriers, never needed to call for help, never made customers feel excluded. What they didn't notice was Amanda's automatic cultural assessment as she worked. The way she adjusted her communication style based on subtle cultural cues. The way she positioned herself to overhear conversations that might need assistance. The way she organized her work with diplomatic precision. These weren't just exceptional customer service skills. They were survival techniques honed in environments where a single mistranslation could spark international incidents and derail years of careful diplomacy. Amanda had chosen cafe work specifically because it allowed her to use those skills to serve diverse communities instead of conducting sensitive negotiations where communication errors could affect global politics. After 14 years of State Department translation work, she'd found peace in the routine of morning rushes and afternoon coffee breaks. But on this particular Tuesday, as she listened to the escalating argument at Table 7, Amanda felt the familiar weight of responsibility that had once guided treaty negotiations between hostile nations. The crisis had been building for weeks. Sino-American Infrastructure Partners, a joint venture between Beijing Construction Group and Martinez Engineering Solutions, was supposed to be the largest infrastructure project in U.S. history. High-speed rail lines connecting major East Coast cities. Thousands of American jobs. Billions in economic development. But cultural misunderstandings had poisoned every meeting. The Chinese side felt disrespected by what they perceived as American directness. The American side was frustrated by what seemed like endless indirect communication. Translation services had failed repeatedly, with technical terms being mistranslated and cultural context being lost entirely. Now, in a last-ditch effort to save the partnership, both sides had agreed to meet at a neutral location, Corner Café, for what everyone knew would be the final negotiation. Amanda could hear the conversation deteriorating from across the cafe. "This is unacceptable," Liu Wei was saying in Mandarin to his colleague. "They clearly don't understand the concept of guanxi. They treat this like a simple business transaction." Jennifer Martinez, meanwhile, was expressing her own frustrations to David Park. "I don't understand what they want from us. We've met every technical specification, every timeline, every budget requirement. What more is there to discuss?" The language barriers were creating parallel conversations. The Chinese executives were discussing relationship building and long-term partnership principles in Mandarin. The American team was focusing on contracts and deliverables in English. Neither side understood what the other was actually saying. Amanda watched the body language deteriorate. Crossed arms. Avoided eye contact. The universal signs of failed communication. At 2:47 p.m., Zhang Min stood up abruptly. "Perhaps this partnership is not meant to be," he said in English, his pronunciation careful but his meaning clear. Jennifer Martinez looked stricken. "Wait please. Let's talk about this." but Lu Wei was already gathering his papers. Talking has not been productive, he replied. Cultural differences appear too significant to overcome. Amanda made her decision. She stepped out from behind the espresso machine, approached the table with a fresh pot of coffee, and said in perfect Mandarin, "Gentlemen, may I offer you more coffee while you consider how to honor both the American value of directness and the Chinese principle of relationship building?" The effect was immediate. Lu Wei and Zhang Min froze, staring at the American barista who had just demonstrated not only fluency in Mandarin, but understanding of the core cultural issue destroying their negotiations. Jennifer Martinez blinked in confusion. "Amanda, you speak Chinese?" Amanda smiled diplomatically. "Among other languages. May I suggest that perhaps this conversation might benefit from someone who understands both cultural perspectives?" What followed was one of the most delicate diplomatic interventions Amanda had ever conducted, and she'd once facilitated peace talks between warring ethnic groups in Eastern Europe. First, she addressed the Chinese executives in Mandarin, acknowledging their frustration with what they perceived as American disregard for proper relationship-building protocols. She explained that American business culture valued efficiency and direct communication as signs of respect, not dismissal. Then she turned to the American team and explained in English that the Chinese concept of guanxi, relationship-based trust, required more personal connection before major business commitments could be made. What the Americans saw as delays, the Chinese saw as necessary foundation building. "Mr. Lu," Amanda said in Mandarin, "the American team's directness comes from their enthusiasm for the project and their respect for your time. They have been prepared for months and are eager to begin building something significant together." "Martinez," she continued in English, "Mr. Lu and Mr. Zhang have been trying to establish the personal trust that Chinese business culture requires for partnerships of this magnitude. They want to ensure this relationship will endure for decades, not just complete a single project." For the first time in weeks, both sides began to understand what the other was actually trying to communicate. "You understood all of our conversations?" Lu Wei asked Amanda in Mandarin. "I understand that both sides want the same thing," Amanda replied. "A successful long-term partnership that benefits both countries. You've been speaking different languages, but you've been saying the same words." Jennifer Martinez leaned forward. "Amanda, where did you learn to speak Mandarin like that? And how do you know so much about international business culture?" Amanda hesitated. For 3 years, she'd successfully avoided detailed questions about her background. The cafe management knew she had previous government experience, but she'd never elaborated. Her customers appreciated her multilingual abilities but never questioned their origins. Now, faced with a failing international negotiation that could affect thousands of jobs and billions in economic development, Amanda found herself at a familiar crossroads. She could deflect, maintain her anonymity, let the deal collapse. Or she could trust these people with the truth about her diplomatic background. "I learned Mandarin at the State Department," she said carefully. "I was a translator for international negotiations." The table fell silent. "State Department?" David Park asked. "Like government translator?" "I specialized in high-level diplomatic communications," Amanda confirmed. "Treaty negotiations, international crisis resolution, cultural mediation between conflicting parties." Zhang Min spoke in rapid Mandarin to Lu Wei, then turned back to Amanda. "You conducted diplomatic negotiations for the American government?" "For 14 years," Amanda replied in Mandarin. "From trade agreements to peace talks. I learned that most international conflicts arise from communication failures, not genuine disagreements." Jennifer Martinez stared at her. "And now you're working in a coffee shop?" Amanda smiled. "I wanted to use my skills to help people in peaceful ways rather than navigate international crises. But sometimes," she glanced at the documents scattered across table 7, "the skills find new applications." Lu Wei leaned back in his chair, studying Amanda with new interest. "Foster, what would a State Department translator suggest for resolving our communication challenges?" Amanda considered this carefully. "With your permission, I could facilitate a cultural bridge conversation. Help each side understand not just what the other is saying, but what they mean within their cultural context." Over the next 2 hours, Amanda conducted what amounted to real-time diplomatic mediation. She helped the Chinese executives explain their emphasis on long-term relationship building. She helped the American team articulate their commitment to partnership beyond simple contract fulfillment. More importantly, she identified the specific translation errors that had been poisoning previous negotiations. The term efficiency has been translated as rushing in your Mandarin materials, Amanda explained to Jennifer. In Chinese business culture, that implies disrespect for proper process. And relationship building has been translated as delays in your English documents, she told Lu Wei. In American business culture, that suggests inefficiency rather than thoroughness. By 5:30 p.m., Sino-American infrastructure partners had not only salvaged their partnership, they had established the cultural understanding framework that would guide their collaboration for the next decade. Foster, Lu Wei said as the meeting concluded, your intervention today was extraordinary. How did you know exactly what cultural issues were preventing our agreement? Amanda began clearing the empty coffee cups from their table. Experience, Mr. Oh. I've seen how cultural misunderstandings can destroy important partnerships. I've also seen how proper communication can build bridges between very different worldviews. Jennifer Martinez gathered her papers, still shaking her head in amazement. Amanda, you literally saved a multi-billion-dollar deal with translation skills. Do you realize what you've done? I help people understand each other, Amanda said simply. That's what translation is really about, not just converting words but bridging meanings. The news of Amanda's diplomatic intervention spread quickly through Washington's international business community. By the following week, her story had reached the State Department's alumni network. By the end of the month, consulting firms were calling Corner Café trying to recruit her. But Amanda declined most offers. She wasn't interested in returning to high-stakes international negotiations. She'd found satisfaction in serving her diverse community at Corner Café. However, the Washington International Business Council had other ideas. Amanda, said Council Director Dr. Sarah Kim during a meeting at the cafe the following week, we've been thinking about your unique qualifications. Would you be interested in developing cross-cultural communication protocols for international business partnerships? Amanda continued steaming milk for a customer's latte. What kind of protocols? Training programs for executives working across cultures. Workshops on avoiding the translation pitfalls that nearly destroyed the Sino-American partnership. Maybe consulting on high-stakes international negotiations. Dr. Kim leaned forward. Amanda, what you did wasn't just individual skill. It was systematic expertise that could prevent thousands of business failures caused by cultural miscommunication. Amanda thought about her 14 years at the State Department, the countless hours spent training junior diplomats in cross-cultural communication, the responsibility she'd felt for preventing international incidents through proper translation. I suppose I could develop some training materials, she said slowly. Cultural mediation principles that might be useful for international business. Would you be willing to conduct workshops? Dr. Kim asked. Teach business executives how to navigate cross-cultural negotiations the way you do? Amanda nodded. Education is important. If my experience can help build better international partnerships, I'm willing to share it. 6 months later, Amanda Foster was teaching cross-cultural communication workshops for Fortune 500 companies throughout the Washington area. Her Advanced Cultural Mediation for International Business seminar had become mandatory training for executives involved in overseas partnerships. But she never forgot why she'd left government service. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., she still arrived at Corner Café, still conducted her linguistic assessment, still served coffee to the diverse international community that made downtown Washington unique. The only difference was that now, when customers asked how she always seemed to understand exactly what they needed, she had a better answer. Sir, I spent 14 years learning to facilitate communication between people from very different cultures. Now I use those skills to make sure everyone feels welcome in our cafe. One customer, a Japanese businessman who'd been struggling with English during his first week in Washington, had smiled and said, "Well, I'm glad the State Department trained you so well." Amanda had nodded seriously. So am I, sir. So am I. The partnership agreement signed at Table 7 of Corner Café now represents the largest infrastructure investment in U.S. history. The first high-speed rail line opened 2 years ahead of schedule, creating 47,000 American jobs and establishing the framework for a new generation of international cooperation. But Amanda had requested that her role remain understated in official accounts. Cultural communication facilitator who helped clarify mutual understanding. Because that's what diplomacy is really about. Not just translating words, but ensuring that people from different cultures can understand each other's intentions, regardless of the linguistic obstacles in their path. The skills Amanda learned conducting treaty negotiations and international crisis resolution may have seemed like overkill for coffee shop customer service. But on one Tuesday afternoon in downtown Washington, when a multi-billion-dollar partnership hung in the balance, those skills made all the difference. Sometimes the most important diplomatic operations happen not in embassy conference rooms or international summits, but in neighborhood cafes where former State Department translators choose to use their expertise to ensure that people from different cultures can communicate effectively during peaceful business interactions. Sometimes the greatest linguistic expertise belongs to people providing community services rather than conducting government negotiations, people who've chosen to apply diplomatic training to civilian cultural exchange, ensuring that skills developed for international relations can be used to build understanding during daily cross-cultural encounters. We need to recognize and appreciate the skilled communication professionals among us who've chosen to serve quietly, especially those whose previous service required facilitating dialogue between conflicting nations so that diverse communities could interact peacefully in welcoming commercial environments. Because true diplomatic expertise doesn't disappear when government service ends, it just finds new applications. And sometimes the most valuable international training involves not treaty negotiations or crisis resolution, but cultural hospitality that ensures the systematic communication skills developed for State Department operations can be used to build understanding and strengthen communities through excellent cross-cultural service that creates welcome during international encounters and gives global business the foundation of mutual respect and cultural appreciation. Today, when international business executives visit Washington, D.C., many specifically choose Corner Café for their negotiations. Not just because Amanda Foster makes excellent coffee, but because they know she's someone who understands that successful communication across cultures isn't just translation, it's building bridges between different ways of seeing the world. And diplomacy, whether between nations or across cafe tables, is ultimately about ensuring that everyone feels heard, understood, and respected.